Hey, folks, movie fans, Demetri Panos here for a very special show for HCA and for all of you who are watching and listening today. I'm doing a commemoration to celebrate the upcoming 45th anniversary of the movie Jaws. Yeah, it's 45 years old. It's going to be in just a few short weeks away. But today, what I'm going to talk about, Jaws, is something a little bit different. I'm not going to go the typical critics route and dissect this movie, which has been dissected over and time again in many different ways. I'm going to take a deep dive, and I am going to talk about Jaws today as seen through the lens of a COVID-19 world. So, yes, throughout this entire thing, I know you've seen memes and GIFs of Mayor Vaughn. Haha, funny stuff, making these parallels, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper than that. I'm going to talk about not only politics, but we're going to talk about the citizens as well, because they have a very important part to play in Jaws and even the media to an extent, very much like today in our pandemic, where it's not just politicians, it's people as well, and the media, of course. So let's get into it. In 1975, the world of movie marketing, and distribution were forever changed. In fact, the entire studio system and the ways movies were made at the time was at the twilight of its era. A new dawn was rising, and it really is a miracle of evolution, really. And what movie am I talking about? And of course, it's Jaws. Today, as I said, I'm not going to talk about the movie's historical relevance. That'll be another show, I hope. But today, I'm going to look at Jaws through a different type of lens, that lens being in the cloud, in the shape of COVID-19. And I'm going to make a correlation of this 1975 movie and how relevant it is. Not just the fact that it remains a fantastic movie after 45 years, but I'm going to make this correlation as to today's current social and political landscape. Now, look, I'm only going to focus on the first two acts of Jaws, and then I'm going to make a quick leap into its 1978 sequel, Jaws 2. I'm going to try to go in chronological order of the movie, and then I'm going to concentrate on specific scenes that I find to be very important and how you can mirror them against today. So it's going to be seen in character in today's current social political climate. But before I get into it, I got to take a little bit of time to talk about the movie's archetypical character. This is a movie, and in it, you need a screenplay, and you need to set up your characters, and these are archetype characters. So meaning they represent certain factions. They could be the best of us. A character can be the best of us, and a character can be the worst of us, but they represent something. So of course, I have to start off with Mayor Larry Vaughn. Okay. Mayor Larry Vaughn is he's the politician. He is the leader of Amity Island. His priority is the island's commerce. He believes a robust commerce is of the utmost importance in making Amity's citizens happy. Being that it is a New England island, of course, they do rely on summer dollars. So he places the economics of the island over people's safety, even if it means, stretching the truth and ignoring evidence. However, he does have a moment of epiphany, albeit at that time, it comes a little bit too late. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Next up is, of course, our man of action, Police Chief Martin Brody. Brody represents not only the everyman, but he is the sensible person. He is the man of reason, of logic, and of action. His main priority is Amity's safety. as soon as there's a hint of a problem, Brody acts and reacts to protect Amity's citizens and, of course, his family. Next up is oceanographer Matt Hooper. Hooper here is the scientist, the great shark expert. He can tell the difference between a great white shark and a tiger shark. A what? His scientific insights provide options, okay? They provide options to guide Brody's actions on how to handle this particular problem. So now we begin. And of course, poor old Chrissy Watkins, as it said in the advertising, she was the first. In this violent death that opens the movie. This is the scene, well, that obviously lends itself to finding the remains of Chrissy, said Chrissy Watkins on the beach, where this basically gets the things in order here. Finding her remains means that, well, something happened to her. What was it? Well, there we are, seeing the chief of police, the would-be boyfriend, and his deputy Hendricks coming across the remains of Chrissy Watkins, which leads us to what I think is really pivotal and important. This goes back into back to the police station, Martin's office. Okay. Here, Paulie tells him that the medical examiner of Amity Island is on the phone. He picks it up, talks to him as he's typing up his police report, and you can see the probable cause of death, as quoted by the Amity chief medical officer, is shark attack. Now that's very fascinating because right once he hears the words shark attack, Brody goes right into action. As I mentioned, he is a man of action, and his first instincts are, he tells his deputy, you got to close the beaches. His secretary, Paulie, tells him of a Boy Scout troop who are doing their mile swim for merit badge. He's got to get out there and get them out of the water, and out of the water fast. Again, he is that man of action. So whilst on the ferry, as he pulls on board, well, that's where we meet Larry Vaughn. Not only do we meet Larry Vaughn, but the chief medical examiner and Amity's councilman, let's just say. And basically, this is the scene in which Vaughn is telling Brody, hey, it's your first summer here. Well, what's that supposed to mean? Well, Amity relies on summer dollars. If they don't go swimming here, if the tourists can't go swimming here, they'll be more than happy to go swimming in the beaches of Cape Cod, the Hamptons, and Long Island. And Brody's like, well, that doesn't mean we have to serve them up a smorgasbord. Then he goes on, I don't think you understand the gut reaction what people have to something like this. And Brody at that point points to the medical examiner and says, hey, I'm only reacting to what I was told. And the medical examiner, guffawing, is like, well, it was a boating accident. And Brody's like, wait a minute, that's not what you told me over the phone. And we know that because we just saw him typing in shark attack. Well, the medical examiner officer says, well, hey, I was wrong. And Brody, being the man that he is like, you're going to stand by that? And he goes, then the medical examiners, I'll stand by that. We'll have to amend our reports. And again, here we go, where Larry Vaughn, you come up with the classic line of, Martin, you yell barracuda. People go, huh? What? You yell great white shark. Or you yell shark. You've got a panic on your hands on the 4th of July. So it's again, the utmost of importance is that the economy, we're coming up on the 4th of July. Not just here in 2020, which we are coming up on the 4th of July, but in the movie, the time setting is about almost a week or less than a week from the 4th of July, and the beaches are going to be important. So this leads us into another extremely important scene. This isn't just because of a little boy's death, that boy being Alex Kintner, but it is about the people on the beach at the time. Again, this goes right from the ferry scene as the ferry is heading back to the island. We go on the beach, and who do we see on the beach other than some of the fine folk of Amity? You will see Mrs. Taft and her husband, Ellen Brody, other people who are there. And of course, that's some bad hat Harry coming out of the water who talks to the chief, and it being his first summer. And we also learn through exposition that Brody doesn't like the water. So again, this is all important. These characters are all important. Why? Because they are witnesses to what's on your screen now. The horrific, bloody death of Alex Kintner. Okay? They are witnesses, as I said. They are on the beach when this happens. In fact, you can hear somebody say, "Hey, did you see that?" And of course, it was too bloody and too violent not to miss. So that takes us to after the yellow raft, the ravaged yellow raft blows up on the beach. That takes us to the scene inside City Hall. This scene is classic, and this scene basically sets everything up because now Mrs. Kintner has set a bounty on said shark. And the City Hall, this town meeting is set up because many of the citizens of Amity, mind you, many of those citizens who are on the beach in the scene before are at this town hall meeting concerned about, well, whether or not they are going to close the beaches. Right here, Mrs. Taft, her husband, she is a hotel owner. She is very concerned that if they close the beaches, she will lose a lot of business, a lot of customers, leading to the line of, "Are you going to close the beaches?" In which Brody says, "Yes, I'm afraid we are." The whole crowd goes into a panic and an uproar, and you can hear through that din various pieces of dialogue. "I don't want them to close the beaches. I've got this business. I sell these things. I've got my shop, store." Mayor Vaughn steps in with his gavel and says, "Only for an hour. Only for an hour." And Brody's like, "I didn't agree to that." And again, it just goes to show how Vaughn is interested in making his constituents happy. And by making them happy, that means we can't close the beaches during the summer, especially leading into the 4th of July. So again, I have to point out that many of those people in the room saw what happened on the beach, perhaps the day before. They witnessed Alex Kintner being eaten. They were there. They know there's a problem in the little island of Amity, but yet they still want to ignore the facts for their own well-being and good. Okay. Again, there's evidence. This isn't just the mayor. The citizens of Amity, many of them, are equally to blame because regardless of what they see with their own eyes, they still say, "We can't close the beaches." Of course, that scene in the town hall leads to the great introduction of Quint, and where he says he'll capture the shark for $10,000, in which they will take that under advisement. Then our next scene, which is at the docks, and every fisherman is out to, go catch this bounty on the shark. And this is where we meet Hooper. Matt Hooper, oceanographer, stepping onto the docks. And right here in this particular photo, you see Matt Hooper with Ben Gardner. Now, Ben Gardner, albeit he's only has about maybe 3 minutes screen time tops, he's very important to this story, and we'll get to that in a second. Now, as Hooper arrives on Amity Island, he meets up with Chief Brody. His first order of business is to examine the remains of the first victim, Chrissy Watkins. He's stunned that her remains are in a box. And when he throws open the sheet that is covering said box, Dreyfuss's performance here is actually, it's quite fantastic. He has to drink water. He chastises the chief for trying to light up a cigarette. And also our chief medical examiner, Dr. Robert Nevin, is in the room as well. And our shark expert is, his conclusion to all of this is, well, this is not a boat accident. It wasn't any propeller. Did you notify the Coast Guard on this? And Brody's like, no, it's just local jurisdiction. He goes, well, it wasn't a coral reef and it wasn't Jack the Ripper. It was a shark. And it cuts to this scene. This scene right here, as we go to the docks. Yes, fishermen caught a shark. They caught a shark. And everybody is, well, they're jubilant. Hey, we got the monster. We're safe. We're good. We can go back to business. We don't have to worry about a thing. Albeit, our expert is taking some measurements. And as Mir Vaughn is walking on to the docks, he sees the hubbub going around, and Brody goes to greet him, and Brody is like, hey, we have the fish. It's good. And of course, Vaughn's first thing is, are you taking pictures? Are you getting it out? And then Hooper comes in and he goes, yep, here's Hooper. And Hooper's like, Martin, look, it's 100 to 1 that these bozos got the shark. And Brody's like, come on, man. He goes, there aren't sharks like this in these waters. He goes, it's 100 to 1, 100 to 1. He goes, the fact of the matter is the bite radius, the radius of this shark's mouth, the tiger shark, do not match the radius of the bites on Chrissy Watkins, in which he just examined. Okay, they just came from that medical examiner's office. He knows. He's seen it. And he's measured it, and he says, hey, they're not matching up. We have a conflict here. We have to fix this. Listen, we can cut the shark open. Very slow digestive system. And, the Kintner boy should probably still be in there, in which Mir Vaughn puts an immediate veto to that and basically says, look, guys, we're not going to do that. Because I'm not going to sit here and watch you cut that shark open and watch the Kintner boys spill out all over the docks. And so right at that moment, what happens? Well, we see Miss Kintner show up at the dock, and she's wearing her funeral black. She asks for Chief Brody. It's a very gut-wrenching scene, and it's the second time we've seen Mrs. Kintner. She comes up to Brody, confirms that it's him, and she levels a slap on him that is heard all through Amity. And she tells Chief Brody, basically, you knew. I just heard that a woman had died here last week, and you knew, and you did nothing about it. Now, again, it's very important because we as an audience know that Martin did try to do something about it, and yet he was vetoed, okay? And also know that Mir Vaughn and Hooper and every other townsman there, all the fishermen, they're witness to what's happening on the docks right now. And she just levies this blame. She doesn't levy it on the mayor. Nope. She doesn't level it on Hooper. She doesn't even know who he is. But she levels it on Chief Brody because he is the man that is supposed to be protecting Amity Island and its citizens. So naturally, she's very upset. And then she walks off. Now, Miravon and his lovely character, she was walking away. He goes, I'm sorry, Martin. She's wrong. And Brody, being the person that he is, says, no, she's not. And then we cut to a scene. We go back to Brody's homestead, and they're preparing for dinner, where Matt Hooper comes over, and Brody is asking Hooper about the characterizations and feeding patterns of sharks and shark attacks and things like that. And Hooper says, well, listen, you're going to be the only sane man here when I head out tomorrow. You've got, you still have a problem in your hands. Now, this is important because Ellen Brody goes, I'm sorry, what? She goes, I thought the shark was caught. And Hooper says, they caught a shark, but they didn't catch the shark. She goes, well, I heard it on the news. I saw it on the news, and I heard it on all the Cape stations. Here's where the media plays into it. The media was given the information. They weren't allowed to talk to the oceanographer, the scientist, the expert. So they give out the information. And Ellen Brody, just being a citizen who's listening and watches the news because it affects her as well. Again, this is where she gets her information from. And Hooper's like saying, no, not true. Not true at all. Later on, well, Hooper convinces Brody to go, let's go to the docks. We're going to go to the docks. We're going to cut open the shark. Let's just be 100% sure that tiger shark is or is not the shark. And of course, they open the remains. They open the shark. A bunch of milk comes splattering out, but there are no remains of little Alex Kintner. So then Hooper suggests, hey, I have my boat. Let's go on the boat. Let's go into his feeding pattern. Let's go into the stretch of water that he's been feeding a lot out of. Maybe we can get some evidence because at this point, Brody needs evidence to convince the mayor and its townfolk. We still have a menace out there. This isn't gone away. So they get on the boat. They come up across. First they come across something very interesting. They come across. Well, what Hooper describes, perhaps maybe a school of mackerel swimming very close together. Personally, I think it's the shark. In any case, upon that, they come across the flotsam and jetsam and the half-sunken boat of Ben Gardner. Now, something interesting here that I only just recently realized myself. When you're talking about the death count in Amity, you have Ben Gardner, but Ben Gardner also had a passenger on his boat. You can clearly see him at the back of the boat when Ben Gardner is heading out to sea, and he gives that great monologue about wait till you'll wish your mother's never met your father's after what happens to you is you slam up against the rocks. It's a great monologue. So there's another victim, let's just say, who's never really talked about too much. I don't know anything about him. I'm not even sure if he's given a name, but we understand that there's a victim. We see this sunken boat. Hooper says, hey, Martin, I got to go underneath. I want to take a look at the ship's hull. Now, even through Brody's dialogue, we as an audience can see that this boat went through some hell. We see that it's banged up. And in fact, one of the last shots, the tracking shot, we could see a what looks like a bite mark taken out of the boat. Now we follow Hooper into the water. He goes and checks the hull, and there's a good sizable hole there in which he finds a great white tooth. Okay. He picks up the tooth, and that's it. That is more physical evidence, but that is the smoking gun, so to speak. And as he goes to look for maybe another piece, this is where we get that amazing jump scare of Ben Gardner's boat popping out of the boat, scaring the living hell out of Hooper, who drops not only his flashlight tooth as he comes up from out of the water. Now, it's important here. Yes, Hooper dropped the tooth. He did. He dropped the tooth. So that would have been the smoking gun. But you know what else we've got? Well, let's talk into the next scene, in which we have Hooper, Brody, talking to Mayor Vaughn on the beach and trying to explain to them that they still have a shark problem. And they still have a pretty big shark problem. And they try to explain to him, hey, you know what? We got to close the beaches, man. And Larry Vaughn is going on about, well, do you have the tooth? No, I don't have the tooth. Yeah, Hooper had an accident. So they don't have the tooth. Big deal. You know what else they got? They have a beaten up boat and they have the remains of Ben Gardner. The other guy must have just been eaten whole. But they have Ben Gardner. And they have a boat that has bites. It was taken right out of the hull. More evidence. And the boat was towed in. And Brody even says to Mayor Vaughn, you ought to see his boat. It was all banged up. We towed it in last night. And Mayor Vaughn, again, just ignores more evidence. He's hinging everything on a shark tooth. And he neglects the other physical evidence that the boat and Ben Gardner were attacked by this great white shark. He even goes as far as chastising our medical expert, our shark expert. He tells him, boy, you'd really love to prove that, wouldn't you? Get yourself on the front cover of the National Geographic. He is denouncing the facts as given to him by an expert. And he goes on to say, despite the towed-in boat, despite the remains of Ben Gardner, he goes, it's the 4th of July and our beaches will be open. He goes, you do whatever you need to keep the beaches safe, but we're going to be in business. We're going to be open for business tomorrow, and nothing you can do about it. We're open for business, which leads us into the next scene, and that is all of the tourists, everybody flocking into Amity Island to enjoy their long 4th of July weekend. And we go to the beach. We go to the lovely beach, and here we have... the beach is packed. Mind you, there's no social distancing. Not that they needed it at the time. They just needed to social distance themselves from the water, but yet they weren't told of the problem. And here we have something else that happens. We have Mayor Vaughn is being interviewed by local TV. And here's what is said by Mayor Vaughn, and I'm quoting, I'm pleased and happy to repeat the news that we have, in fact, caught and killed a large predator that supposedly injured some bathers. But as you see, it's a beautiful day. The beaches are open and people are having a wonderful time. Amity, as you know, means friendship. I got to go back to the supposedly injured. No, they were killed. They were eaten. We have remains of Chrissy Watkins. We have witnesses who saw Alex Kintner. And now we have the remains of Ben Gardner and his boat. They weren't injured, folks. They were not injured. Supposedly injured. They weren't supposedly killed either. They were attacked and eaten. And that's the end of the story. Mayor Vaughn then looks and sees nobody is in the water, and he goes to some of his pride and joy constituents, and he convinces them. He says, hey, why aren't you in the water? Why aren't you going to swim? And husband and wife are like, well, I just put on some sunscreen. I'm soaking up the rays of the sun. And Vaughn pretty much says, get in the water, please. Get in the water. Go in the water. So he's telling his people to go into the water, in which they do with much trepidation. It's a fabulous scene because the look on their faces is like, they're just like scared. But once they go in, the rest of the beach, like sheep, follow and they go into the water as well. So we know what happens at the beach. There's some kids make a hoax, cardboard fin, shark, big panic. They get everybody out of the water safely. But meanwhile, there's an estuary, a pond, so to speak. And Brody is sent in believing the pond would be safe for his son, who just got a brand new sailboat for his birthday. He believes he would be safe. Just put it into, go to the pond. And little Michael Brody is like, the pond is for old ladies. And he's like, just do it for the old man. Okay. So now we go to the pond, in which there is an artist on shore, and she sees the dorsal fin of a great white shark making its way into the pond as the panic is settling down at the main beach. She starts yelling shark. And Brody's like, okay, what's going on now? And his wife is like, Michael's in the pond. And they start running towards the pond. Now we see the great white shark, its fin and tail, tracking on a boat. A man who's just there to help these boys, give them advice on how to tie a knot and get their sail set up. And this leads to the great estuary attack. Now, look, folks, I got to take a quick aside because I argue that Jaws has the most realistic shark of all the other Jaws movies. And this scene is actually a scene that I think really highlights my argument here. This scene to me was extraordinarily scary, where this boat person gets attacked and killed. And then this leads to the floating of the leg. Again, in another show, we can detail how this scene was originally filmed and how it was deemed at that time probably too violent, so they had to reshoot it. But in any case, our great white shark has made it into the estuary, and there is another violent, bloody attack, again, with witnesses. And this is where Michael Brody is brought out from the water. We see his legs are still intact, and he's suffering from shock. And of course, Brody is there to protect his family and try to, again, be a man of action and do what's good for Amity. And on every level, that has kind of failed, sadly. And this has led to a scene in which they take Michael into the hospital, and he's got to stay overnight. And while at the hospital, Brody sees Mayor Vaughn walk in as well, and he approaches Vaughn and he pulls him into an empty bed, draws the curtain, and he's like, okay, Larry, you're going to do the right thing here. You're going to sign the papers to let Quint go out and kill the shark. Vaughn is in a daze at this point. He's in a daze. He starts ticking off his fingers, and you just see him. He's going, July, August. And Brody's like, what? August? He's like, August. He goes, the summer's over, Larry. He goes, you're the mayor of Shark City. You want to keep these beaches open. And that kind of wakes Vaughn up. He's very emotionally stricken. But this is where the epiphany comes in. An epiphany that certain leaders haven't had. But the epiphany is like, Martin, my kids were on that beach too. This is important. Why? Because it finally affects Mayor Vaughn. he knows through his inaction, his kids could have been attacked. Because the reality of it is now all of Amity knows that there is a great white shark in these waters. It's been kind of covered up. And it's when you look at it through today's lens, it's about, well, are we in denial over COVID-19? Do people believe that this pandemic is actually happening? Hey, many people have said that it's a hoax until it has affected them personally in one way, shape, or form, whether they have gotten sick or whether friends, family have gotten sick. It's a very important line. But the political leader, the mayor of Amity, has that epiphany, and albeit at this point, it is a little too late. We know how the rest of Jaws goes. We know that at the end of Jaws, through this great sea chase adventure, Brody kills the shark in explosive fashion, so to speak. So now I want to quickly go into 1978's sequel because, again, it has a scene that is one of those scenes where you're told not to believe your eyes. You're not to believe facts. So in 1978, Jaws 2 comes out. And pretty much just to quickly recap, two divers who find the wreck of the Orca, that's Quint's boat from Jaws. They're snapping pictures, and while snapping pictures around the Orca, they're attacked by another great white shark. Again, there's no witnesses there other than the camera. Then we go into a scene where a water skier and the person driving the boat, they're attacked and killed. Again, no witnesses here, really, outside of an old woman whose house is far off. She really can't see what's happening except for the explosion of the boat when the shark attacks the boat. Meanwhile, Martin Brody, he's trying to take some action. He even has a conversation with Vaughn saying, hey, we might have another shark on our hands. And Vaughn is like, do I look like an idiot to you? Does every missing person on this island have to be a great white shark? And Brody's like, well, maybe it is. But I've got two divers gone, a water skier and a driver boat, just missing, no explanation. And Vaughn's like, don't push it, Martin. Stop. I'm not going to have a repeat of this. Don't push it. So now our politician, well, he hasn't learned anything from 1975. And he continues to go on. Don't push it. Don't bother me with this. Just do your job. Keep the beaches safe. Okay. So that's what Martin does. And he has a mistake. He while at a lookout on the beach, he mistakenly sees some blue fish who he believes is the great white shark. He actually shoots his gun off in this public beach. It's a real big goof. But around the same time, the camera from the divers at the beginning of the movie, that has been brought to Amity's photo shop. And they call Brody to come on in. They're going to develop the film to see if there's anything. And lo and behold, there is. There is a photo of a shark. So Brody's like, that's it. That's the one. I got it. And when you look at the photo, it is pretty clear that you could see the mouth, the eye, the teeth of a great white shark. He takes it to town hall. Now, he walks in a little bit surprised, Brody that is, because the selectmen are all there. The council's right there at a table. Why are they there? They're actually talking about Brody and his actions and what transpired on the beach earlier in that day. But Brody there is like, hey, he walks in with some confidence saying, you know what? You can't call me crazy anymore. I got photographic evidence. It was take a look at this. And this is the scene that depicts this right here. He's even pointing. He goes, look, right there. There's the eye. There's the mouth. There are the teeth. We got another shark problem in our hand. And as the photo goes down the line, you hear dialogue such as, huh, it's really dark, isn't it? Wow, this photo was taken underwater. Huh, wow, is that seaweed? And this sets Brody off. And it's one of the, in my opinion, it's a great movie monologue. And I've actually tweeted this out, over a year ago, because it still resembles what's going on even today, because Brody's basically saying, whoa, are you folks going to tell me that I don't know what a shark looks like? Because I've seen one up close. And he tells them, you better plan on doing something about this one, because I don't intend on going through that hell again. And what happens to our dear police chief, Martin Brody? He gets fired. Yes. Brody gets fired for bringing evidence to the councilman to say, you have a problem in your hand. You have a problem. You need to take care of this. And for his actions, for bringing the truth to light, to photograph, even he was being told, don't believe your eyes. Don't believe what you see. And he got fired for it. So now look, folks, you can look at Jaws and that scene in Jaws 2 in many ways. And tying it into the COVID-19 world really isn't that difficult. And I say this not to be political. It doesn't really matter what side of the political fence you're on, okay? You just look at the facts of the movies. Just look at the movies, okay? The medical examiner is forced to change his report from shark attack to a boating accident. Brody is told by the mayor that tourists would be happy to go swim elsewhere. Council and Amity residents, they witnessed attacks. They witnessed Alex Kintner get eaten in violent fashion. Again, not believing their eyes. Facts were given by experts in the field, experts in the field, and they're ignored by most everybody except Brody. It just flat out ignored. Like, we got the shark. No, you didn't catch the right shark. No, we got the shark. Again, there's physical evidence as to what happened. So when I look at the great white shark today, the great white shark in Jaws, in both the novel and the movie, it's a metaphor, really. It's a catalyst. What it does is it really highlights the weaknesses of Amity, its politics, and its townfolk. They're anything but friendly. They care only of themselves and their well-being. They're not thinking of the broader picture, even though they have facts and evidence. And it's not, and like I said, this isn't just the politician. This isn't just Mayor Vaughn. It's everybody. It's the citizen. It's a failed leadership that continually, that twists the narrative. Supposedly injured some bathers. COVID-19 is supposedly just a flu. Supposedly. 115,000 deaths. 115,000. Supposedly just a few. We got 15. It's going to go to 0. Oh, we're going to have a vaccine by the end of the year. And now when you look at it, COVID-19 is really not even being discussed as much as it was. And truth, our news cycle changes so quickly, it's hard to focus on any one thing for too long because something else will happen or something is said and we automatically switch attention, but we're forgetting about certain things. And when you look at COVID-19 and what's happening today, wearing of masks is just being asked, and people not believing, not wanting to, not caring about their other people other than their own well-being. Just look at a movie. A classic movie from 1975. And that should tell you all you need to know. Who are you rooting for in Jaws? Who is the protagonist? Who is the antagonist? Who's the expert? Who do you believe in this? You, as the audience, we know. We see the attacks happen. Spielberg shows us these in fine fashion. We are witnesses as well. And yet, in the movie, these characters fight the facts, except for Brody and Hooper. So you have to ask yourself, who really is? If you're rooting for Brody to find and catch the shark, if you like Matt Hooper because he's telling the truth, well, you should be able to take that and put that in today's world and say, well, who is the Brody in this situation? I mean, you like Brody, right? You don't hate him. You laugh at Mir Vaughn. I know this to be true because I've seen the GIFs, I've seen the memes all throughout social media, comparing him to certain political leaders around the world. I've seen Matt Hooper being compared to certain scientists, experts in the field. And you like Brody. You want him to come out of Jaws alive. So if you take that and you put it into today's world, what do you get? Who do you root for? Are you rooting for Brody, for Hooper, for Mir Vaughn? Just think about that. And I never thought, and I'm sure Peter Benchley, I'm sure Steven Spielberg, Carl Gottlieb, and Howard Sackler, the uncredited writer in Jaws, I'm sure they never knew that 45 years later, not only would we be celebrating this movie's anniversary, deservedly so, but they didn't, there was not, I don't even think there was a COVID-1 at that point. They had no idea that the writing of the book and the making of this movie was going to resemble what is happening in 2020 today. Because yes, there's a cloud in the shape of COVID-19 that we all still have to pay attention to. 115,000 deaths is not a lie. And when you watch Jaws, just think of the shark as being COVID-19, or think of COVID-19 being the great white shark. Is it safe to go outside? Do you want to go outside without protection? Think about that. And go watch Jaws and think about it in this world, in today's modern day world, and what's going on around you. And you can easily plug it in. And again, this has nothing to do with politics. I'm just taking a movie and plugging what happens plot wise and just putting it into today's world. So I would just want you to think about that. Well, that's going to wrap up this show. I want to thank you very much for tuning in, for listening, watching, and for all those who will click on later on. I also have to give a big thanks. They use StreamYard to get this out to you live. But I also have to big a huge thanks to co-founder of the Hollywood Critics Association, Scott Menzel. He inspired me to do this solo podcast, and I took his advice, and he also helped greatly. I always find that at this stage of my life, the moment you stop learning or stop caring to learn about new things, what's the point? And I learned so much about putting a podcast of this type together, and it was because of Scott Menzel. And I know that his support just goes out to all of the Hollywood Critics Association members. Scott, I thank you. I thank your wonderful wife, Ashley. And I thank actually the Hollywood Critics Association for all your kind support. I've been reading all of your tweets about what you've been doing and the movies you're watching. Thank you very much. And to you, the audience, thank you very much for watching this. I hope to do some more one-off and talk about other movies, not in this kind of realm, but I appreciate it. I hope you look at Jaws through a different lens. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.